One of the best parts of my job is getting to talk to smart people about emerging technologies and business trends. That's why it was a real treat when Sridhar Sudarsan stopped in recently for a few hours to talk about AI. Sridhar is IBM's CTO for Watson Platforms and Partnerships. In this video, we focus on Watson services for CoreML, which allows developers to build Watson models in the cloud and deploy apps on Apple iOS devices. Putting Watson in your pocket is a big deal. We had a conversation at Think about an announcement at that point on Watson's services for CoreML, the work that you're doing with Apple. Can you tell me a little bit about what it is and how it's been going since Think?
Yeah, so absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me here, Adrian. And so what we announced at Think was a continuation of our partnership with Apple that we've had since the last 4 years, for the last 4 years now. And the thing that, specifically around Watson services for CoreML, which we launched then, is really about bringing a completely transformational way of mobile applications and intelligence in mobile applications. And so to tell you a little bit more about what it is, we brought the Watson visual recognition service, which was available only on the cloud up until then, onto now locally running on Apple hardware. So, using CoreML. And CoreML is a framework that Apple launched last year, made available last year as part of iOS 11, where essentially it brings machine learning and inferencing, the ability to run inferencing using machine learning locally on your iPads or iPhones, right? Any of your Apple devices. And the way that you do that is CoreML is a framework that's really optimized for Apple hardware. And so as a developer, what you can do is you can build your own machine learning models. You can create your own machine learning models, and then you can convert them to CoreML. And once you do that, then it's running locally on Apple hardware. Now, what Apple did, though, was...
But when you're developing them, you're not developing them on the Apple hardware, right?
No, you're not developing them. So that's exactly right. So when Apple essentially left the onus of how you build these machine learning models to the developers, so they can go use any of their favorite tools or sort of write them, custom if they want to, right? Now, what we have been doing from the Watson side is, our philosophy has always been to make machine learning and AI easy for developers to consume, which is why, for the most part, our services Watson services are available as APIs for developers, right? So that it's easy for them to focus on the business application, on their application itself, and then, let Watson do all of the heavy lifting on the AI and the machine learning side. So what we did here was we essentially launched a tool called Watson Studio that actually allows you as a developer to go create a machine learning model. So in this case, a visual machine learning model in a few simple set of steps without you having to be an expert on machine learning at all. So essentially what you do is you bring data, in this case images. So think about images captured from any camera. You bring them into Watson Studio, so it's a drag and drop type operation. You label them, right? So that way you essentially are telling the system as to what image is what. And then once you do that, it's as simple as literally clicking a button saying train model. And when you do that, within minutes you have a model created. And then you have the step to export as CoreML. And that's it. I mean, the moment you do that, now you have the model available and you can bring it into Xcode and then you can drop it on your iPhone and you can run it. So what we really did was we brought the ability, so three things, right? One is allowing you to run a custom-built Watson visual recognition model locally on your Apple hardware. So what that really means is you can now run this in a completely disconnected mode. So imagine you're offline, you're in airplane mode, you have no connectivity, you have inconsistent connectivity.
Right.
You can still run your machine learning models, and you can actually point your camera to or take pictures with your iPhone or iPad and have them classified locally. Right, so that's step number one. Step number two, as I said, with Watson with Watson Studio, now you can actually create your custom model. So if you look at the enterprises, They're not, interested as much in like a simple hot dog, not hot dog type model where, you're just classifying general objects, but they're very specifically interested in things that are within their domain, right? And so being able to create custom models is an important aspect, which now you can do very simply as a developer using Watson Studio. And then the third thing we did was we also made available an SDK that allows you to very easily combine your offline visual recognition processing with the rest of the IBM Watson services on the cloud. And so as a developer, again, you can very easily call, for additional richer insights from data, from services that are running on the cloud that has access to a lot more data, you can bring
from the app.
From the same app, yes. So using the SDK. So essentially think about, let's say you want to determine, for example, on this table, if there's a crack. It's a very simple example, but let's say you want to determine if there's a crack. You point your camera and this one's pretty straightforward because you can visually see it, but imagine a manufacturing company that has multiple hundreds or thousands of these tables coming out, and you're just essentially mounting a camera. But the concept is that you're pointing your iPhone, you're detecting if there's a crack, and then in this case, maybe that's you want to just know that there's a crack, and you want to mark the fact that this particular table is cracked. But then you might also have a system where it's not just a table, but let's say it's a piece of equipment, and I'm a technician who's going out and trying to fix it, and I want to know more about how to fix it. Now that information, if you think about it, comes from manuals, comes from past, events and similar kind of issues that occurred. It could come from conversations that people have had, forums or conversations that have been captured. It could come from, outside sources, subscribed sources, etc. So depending on all of these kinds of sources, you now make those available, let's say, to a service like Watson Discovery Service, which now can take a query. In this case, it's an implicit query, or I can have the technician talk. But the point is now I'm taking metadata from this particular image. I'm then sending it to the cloud, and I'm getting responses on how to fix it, maybe, or what can I do, or how do I order a replacement part. I mean, you can connect the entire thing. And all of that is actually fairly seamlessly possible as a developer, where a lot of the plumbing is taken care of within the SDK. So that's where now you're combining the speed and the processing in an offline nature with the richness of insights that you can actually get from the cloud.
Okay.
So that's the three set of things, the three things that, if you look at in terms of how it enables a user, how it enables a developer, and how it enables businesses in general.
Great. Well, like yourself, I spend a lot of time in airplane mode, so I like the idea that connectivity can be spotty and you're still going to get some functionality. When IBM first started the ecosystem program, which would have been end of 2013, I had the good fortune to interview 5 of the first ecosystem partners. And over the last few years, and it's nearly 5 years, there have been a lot of people building apps. What do you see in terms of, in particular, the work with Apple? What sort of apps? You talked about a couple of good examples, and I like the manufacturing one. Is it mostly enterprise or business-oriented apps, or just anybody building consumer apps that you're using it?
Yeah, actually, so back to the first ecosystem you're talking about, I know all of those partners because I worked with every one of them back then. Fun days. So you're right. I think in terms of the types of apps that you're talking about, so when Apple launched CoreML, I think last fall, a lot of the apps that developers were building were fairly consumer focused, right? I think more fun and interesting type apps just to play with the technology. I think the shift that we've seen now is, as IBM's focus is primarily on the enterprise. And so one of the things, as I mentioned, we worked with a company, we worked with a client, Coca-Cola in CPG, as one of the first sort of examples. Coca-Cola is a very innovative company. And they really saw the value of a technology like this. And so working with us and Apple, it was really about transforming how their field technicians do work. For field technicians, minutes equals money, right?
Absolutely.
And so being able to be productive and now use their camera instead of just pointing and using the light for that, now they actually can start scanning and capturing information. So it saves them valuable amount of time in part identification, in issue detection, diagnosis, and then in some cases, repair ideas as well, right? And then and that's kind of the whole way of looking at it. Now that's just from a field technician perspective, and again, like I said, that's applies across industries. But then, since Think, you asked me about other applications, and I've been talking to over 20, 30 clients now in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and these are clients that are across a number of industries, ranging from financial services, insurance, to retail, to manufacturing. And the ideas are just continuing to evolve. I think we're beginning to just scratch the surface, right? There's a lot that I don't even know as of now. Right. But if the moment you show the power and the capability to the enterprises, they have so many challenges that they're now beginning to start looking at. So now imagine that you have camera. It is actually a camera on, let's say, an iPhone. Mm-hmm. It is scanning or capturing images just locally on the device. And you only need to send metadata. So I don't need to send an image of every single component, but I can only send that, hey, I have a defect here, how do I fix that? So I can just send that as a general query, mm-hmm. and I can get sort of specific information back. And I can do that based on context as well, right? I mean, there's location information, there's there's events before and after that happen. Right. So there's a lot of context that you can capture, but I don't need the raw image, or I don't need the raw data to be sent. So there's a lot of those kinds of scenarios that are also being explored. There were other ideas around, hey, if a user is filling out a form, can we, detect some things locally without that form data actually being sent to the cloud? We all know when we fill forms out that, there are things that get missed. And then, typically today, if you look at workflows in a lot of companies, whether it's your utility company or a bank or an insurance company, it goes through a number of steps before somebody finds out that something's missing, and then it comes all the way back. And so, it's a lot of loss of time, valuable time. It's a productivity impact, and then most importantly, it's a consumer satisfaction issue as well, right? I mean, you think that you've done your job and you've sent your stuff, but then 10 days later or maybe a month later, you find out that it just comes back because you've not filled out some field. So being able to do things like that, so there's a number of ideas like that are coming up. You don't have to work through a lot of things. So now with the ability of having this technology, no matter where you are, no matter what kind of connectivity situation you're in, you can start doing a lot of this. And so that, I think, is really in terms of how you want to start using it. And I think we're still seeing just the beginning of it.
I would expect to see a lot of innovation as people understand what the potential is. Mm-hmm. So, thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to hearing more from your group and seeing more developments in the ecosystem. Great.
Thank you for having me, Adrian. It has been really a pleasure chatting with you.
Thanks.
Thank you.